Hi everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of Plaguenarr. And as some of you might know, I'm a big fan and collector of the second edition of Warhammer 40k, and after Golden Demon I got a little bit nostalgia and decided to show you how I paint my second edition Ultramarines. And for the armor coloring, we're starting off with Kaleidos Sky mixed down with 1 part water to 1 part paint, and base coating all the armor parts with 2 to 3 coats. And as usually for a base coat, I would recommend you to use a little bit of a bigger brush. I'm using here an Artis Opus Series S size 2 brush. And as you can see, I did a little bit of a sub-assembly here. I separated the backpack and the bolter, and this is mainly because these old minis have a really static pose, which makes it really hard to reach a couple of parts of the mini, especially the chest eagle and the neck part. And to achieve a box art style standard, it's really important that even these parts will painted in a high quality way. So just make your life easy by doing this kind of sub-assemblies, that you don't have to use your brush in a strange angle and always feel comfortable while painting. And here's a little side note about comfort. I would say that comfort in painting is the second most important part besides practice to achieve high quality standards of painting at all. In the second step, we're using Flash Gitz Yellow mixed down with 1 part water to 1 part paint to create a little bit of a more fluid consistency, and base coating the chest eagle, the armor trims and the eagle on the bolter. And I know that some of you might say now, if I would have been covered the mini in a full blue base coat or even primed the mini white, the yellow would have been covering much easier in roundabout 1 to 2 coats instead of 3 to 4 coats, but this would be also a totally valid way to go. So if you want to prime the mini blue or white, just do it the way you like. I just like priming the mini black because it gives me a little bit more of control about shadow and light on the mini. And with the other base coat, you probably would have problems with covering metallics and stuff like that. In the next step, we're simply using Evil Sun Scarlet thinned down with 1 part water to 1 part paint and base coating the gem on the chest eagle and the bolter casing. With XV88 mixed down with 1 part water and 1 part paint, we're then base coating all the pouches around the armor. And what's really important while base coating this kind of layers is that you always let the layer underneath be dry before you put a layer above. This is really important to create this Eavy metal style look, because the foundation of the Eavy metal style is clean and smooth looking surfaces. This is why I always go for 2 to 3 real thin coats to create a real smooth finish as a foundation for the rest of the painting. Then it's time to start base coating all of the metal parts, and for this we're using Iron Breaker mixed down with 1 part airbrush thinner and 1 part color. And I can't stop about talking this kind of a little hack. Thinning down metallics with airbrush thinner, it changed my life. It keeps the color super covering while be more fluid and in the end creating super smooth surfaces. I can just recommend you to grab a bottle of airbrush thinner and just start using this hack for base coating metallics. For finishing the base coat, we're using Warp Block Bronze mixed down with 1 part airbrush thinner to 1 part color and covering all of the bullets. And in the next step, we're heading over to the shading and start with shading the metal parts. For this, we're gonna use 1 part Basilicanum Gray, 1 part Contrast Medium, and half of a part of water just to get this mix a little bit more flowing and simply covering all the metal parts we base coated in a step before. For the yellow parts, we're using 1 part Leandrin Yellow, 1 part Contrast Medium and a tiny little bit of water to get a little bit of flow into the mix. For the shoulder trims, we're using the same mixture and glazing over the whole shoulder trims 2 to 3 coats just to darken the yellow a little bit down. To creating a little bit of deeper recess shades on the armor, we're using pure ultramarine sprue mixed down with 1 part water to 1 part paint and starting to recess shade all of the blue armor parts. I use here roundabout 2 coats for each area. And one thing I could mention is that I use a little bit of an overloaded brush in the lower parts and flood the recesses a little bit, while on the upper parts I try to maintain as much precision as I can by wiping off the excessing paint from my brush. And also don't worry too much about mistakes in this stage. You can always go back to Kaleidos Sky to fix especially the blue armor parts. For the yellow armor parts, especially for the trims on the shoulders, you should go for a little bit more of precision here, but even if you do some mistake in this stage, it's not horrible. We will anyways edge highlight them in a later stage. For a recess shade on the red parts, we're simply using pure flash T-Res red and adding this around the recess on the gemstone of the chest eagle and also adding it all around the recesses on the bolter casing. As a recess shade on the leather parts, we're using pure snakebite leather and adding this on the pouches and all the surrounding areas. Now it's time to add a little bit of a glaze shade to bring in some variation, and we're starting with the leather parts by using 1 part snakebite leather and 1 part contrast medium. And here are my top 5 tips for creating real smooth glaze shades. Number 1. Load up your brush and wipe off the excessing paint. Number 2. Wait until your color is dry before applying another layer. Number 3. Always move your brush from the lightest area into the direction of the darkest area. Number 4. With every new layer, start a little bit deeper in the shaded direction to create real smooth transitions. And number 5, use a real thin layer of paint as a final coat over all the previous layers to create even smoother transitions between the transitions. With 1 part Blood Angel thread and 1 part contrast medium, we're then creating a glaze shade to shade the bolter casing and the gemstone on a chest eagle. For the glaze shade on the armor, we're mixing 1 part Ultramarines blue and 2 parts contrast medium, and what's really important in this stage is that you really wipe off the excessing paint after loading up your brush, just to prevent streaks and stains. But in case of an accident, don't panic, simply use your Kaleidos Sky, base coat the area again, probably try to maintain the recess shade and start glazing this area from the beginning. And what's really cool about the armor glaze shading is that you can start with 1 area and go over all other areas, and if you're back to your first area with the second coat of glazing, everything should be dry and you can start over again until every 4 layers are applied. by the way, if you like this kind of videos, I would be really happy if you simply like, share, comment or even subscribe to my channel. After the glaze shading, we're moving on to start edge highlighting all the areas with glaze shaded so far, and we're starting with the armor parts and a pure layer of Kalidos Sky. By using the base color of the armor for the first thick highlight we will create on the edges, we're creating smooth transitions between the shaded areas and the main color of the armor to create a solid foundation for sharper and lighter edge highlights, which makes this style really standing out. And as you can see, I'm using here a relative big brush again. This is again the Artis Opus Series S size 2 brush I've also used for base coating the armor. And to get a little bit more precision about the thickness of the lines and drawing a little bit more straighter lines, I would recommend you here to follow the edges and painting straight lines instead of using the side of the brush. With Techless Blue as a second edge highlight, we're then starting to create thinner lines above the Kalidos Sky edge highlight. And as you can see, I'm in most of the cases still painting straight lines. This just gives me a little bit more control over the thickness of the lines and also ensures a more even result. And of course, don't forget the iconic shoulder reflection highlight. And as you also can see, I switched down to an Artis Opus Series S size 00 brush just to have a little bit of a smaller tip and in the end result, more precision and thinner lines. And as a last step for the armor, we're then moving on to Northern Blue and trying to create real sharp and tiny edge highlights on the edges of the armor. And now I'm switching back and forth between the side of the brush and regular brush strokes just to create as tiny edge highlights as I can. And just a quick recommendation here, especially for the beginners, the simple surface, the not so sharp edges and the lack of details makes these minis perfect for practicing your brush control. You can get them painted really cheap on eBay. Just buy a little bottle of ISO, strip off the paint and start practicing your brush control really cheap on super simple surfaces and awesome minis. For the bolter casing, we're basically doing the same. We're using the base color Evil Sun Scarlet in this case and creating thicker edge highlights around all the edges of the bolter casing. And for the second highlight on the bolter casing, we're moving on to pure Wild Rider Red and basically doing the same pattern, just painting tinier edge highlights all around the bolter casing. For the gemstone, we're simply painting the upper left half with a full coat of Wild Rider Red. As a final highlight for the red parts, we're then moving on to Troll Slayer Orange and just painting the upper edges of the bolter casing. For the gemstone, we're simply just adding a reflection highlight on the upper left edge and the lower right corner. For the yellow highlights, we're starting with pure Flash Gits Yellow, and before we start to edge highlight the shoulder trims, we're starting with highlighting basically all the feathers on the Imperial Eagle of the bolter and the Imperial Eagle on the chest. Also, don't forget to fix the area around the gem. And then start off with another layer over all the feathers on the Imperial Eagles. For the outer rims of the shoulder parts, simply use the side of the brush again, and if you move on to the inner parts of the shoulder trims, simply use regular brush strokes, and if you mess up, go back to some ultramarines blue and overpaint the recess shade again. With some Army Painter Moondust, we're then adding final touch-ups and highlights over the Imperial Eagle by painting the upper rim over the gemstone and highlighting all the tips of the feathers and real sharp edge highlights on all the shoulder trims. For the leather parts, we're also using XV88, so the base color again, and painting around all the edges with a little bit of a thicker edge highlight. With tiny edge highlights of pure Baylor Brown, we're finishing up all the leather parts to have some awesome pouches around the Mini. As a final highlight for our Mini, we're using pure Iron Breaker, this time not thinned down with some airbrush thinner, just a little bit thinned down with water to get a little bit of a thinner consistency, but really thick to have a little bit more control within the brush, and simply highlighting all the raised areas of all the metal parts. then it's time to assemble the mini with some Taimia extra thin. To kick in some of the nostalgia from the 90s, we're using 1 part Warboss green and 1 part Straken green mixed with 1 part water and base coating the whole base with 2 to 3 coats. With 1 part military shader, 1 part contrast medium and 1 part water, we're then shading the base with 2 coats. With pure Warboss green and a small dry brush, in my case a Arches Opus Series D extra small plus brush, we're dry brushing the whole base. With pure Straken green, we're then dry brushing the base again. For a final touch-up, we're then using Warboss green with 1 part water and 1 part color and painting the trim of the base. To balance the colors and remove reflections, we're then overcoating the mini with a full coat of Vallejo Premium Satin Varnish, and then it's time to take a look into our final result. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Let me know it in the comments if you like some more second edition stuff. I hope you had some fun and I hope to see you soon.